The battlefield shook with the clash of iron and the cries of dying men. Roman legions advanced in perfect formation, shields locked, spears ready. But behind them thundered something even more fearsome. Not men, not cavalry, but dogs. Massive, armored beasts with jaws like iron and hearts forged in loyalty. They were not pets. They were weapons. Guardians, executioners, heroes. Some died nameless. Others became legends whispered through the centuries. Tonight, you will meet 5 of them. 5 Roman war dogs whose courage burned so fiercely, even Rome itself bowed to their loyalty. Rome is remembered for its emperors, its generals, and the endless march of its legions. But hidden within the pages of history lies a force few ever speak of: the dogs who fought, bled, and died beside them. These were no ordinary animals. Trained from birth, they wore iron collars and chain armor. They leapt at cavalry, tore through enemy ranks, and stood guard over their masters long after death had claimed them. To the Romans, they were not pets. They were soldiers, warriors whose loyalty could not be bought, only earned through blood and battle. And while the names of kings and senators fade, the tales of these dogs endured, whispered by soldiers who swore they witnessed something greater than man's courage, the devotion of a beast who knew no fear. Tonight, we remember them, the 5 Roman war dogs who became legends. Origins of Roman war dogs. Long before the Roman legions marched across Europe, dogs were already weapons of war. From the rugged mountains of Epirus came the Molossian hounds, giant muscular beasts bred by tribes who valued strength above all else. These dogs were so fierce that their reputation spread from Greece to Carthage and finally to Rome itself. The Romans, ever practical, saw not just animals, but living engines of war. They imported the Molossians, crossed them with local breeds, and forged a new kind of soldier. Iron collars lined with spikes were fastened around their necks. Some were clad in chainmail, their bodies transformed into armored projectiles. When unleashed against cavalry, they would dart beneath horses, tearing at throats and bellies, bringing down riders in a storm of blood and chaos. But their role went beyond battlefields. In Roman camps, these dogs were guardians of the night. They patrolled the perimeters, their growls warning of approaching enemies long before sentries could react. Thieves and spies feared them more than any human guard. Even Roman generals entrusted their lives to these loyal hounds, knowing no assassin could slip past a war dog's ears. Yet what made them truly legendary was not just their strength, but their unyielding devotion. Unlike mercenaries, they could not be bribed or bought. Once bonded to a master, they would fight to the death, sometimes even beyond it. In the vast machinery of Rome's conquests, war dogs were small cogs, but vital ones. They were the silent companions of empire, the shadows that walked beside the legions, and the first glimpse of death an enemy soldier often saw. The guardian of Placentia. In the northern frontier of Italy, near the city of Placentia, a Roman outpost once stood under constant threat. The social war raged, and every soldier lived with the weight of death pressing on his shoulders. Among them was a young legionary who marched with a companion not clad in iron, but in fur, his war dog. The bond between soldier and beast was unshakable. The dog had been raised in the camp, trained to obey only the voice of its master. It guarded his tent at night, shared his rations, and even followed him into the chaos of battle. But fate would soon test that loyalty. During a sudden ambush, the legionary fell, struck by a spear before his comrades could rally. Blood soaked the earth, and as soldiers were forced to retreat, they left behind many of the fallen. Yet one warrior refused to abandon him: the dog. When dawn broke and the survivors returned to reclaim their dead, they found a haunting sight. The faithful hound sat unmoving beside its master's body. Enemies had dared to approach in the night, hoping to loot the corpse, but the dog had fought them off savagely. Bite marks and blood told the story. It had stood guard against overwhelming odds, refusing to yield even when wounded. Roman soldiers, hardened men who had seen cruelty beyond measure, were struck silent. Here was a display of loyalty greater than any oath sworn by man. They named the hound the guardian of Placentia. From that day forward, stories of the dog spread through the legion camps, told by firelight, with reverence usually reserved for heroes. Though it eventually perished beside the body it refused to leave, the memory endured. Roman commanders later ordered monuments raised not for the soldier, but for the dog. For in its silent vigil, Rome saw the purest form of devotion, a protector who guarded even in death, embodying a loyalty so fierce that neither hunger, nor pain, nor fear could break it. The guardian of Placentia became a legend, not because it lived, but because it refused to leave. Even after death had claimed its master, the Siege of Asculum. The year was 89 BC. The social war tore through Italy as Rome's former allies rose in rebellion against the empire that once called them brothers. One of the bloodiest sieges unfolded at Asculum, where Roman soldiers fought desperately to breach the walls. In the chaos of this brutal conflict, one war dog etched its place in history. It belonged to a centurion, a man hardened by years of service, who trusted his hound more than many of his comrades. The animal was trained for frontline combat, clad in spiked armor, and bred to meet death without hesitation. As the fighting raged, the centurion was struck down, his body collapsing in the mud. His loyal companion, though wounded by arrows and blades, refused to abandon him. Witnesses described how the dog, bleeding from its own injuries, stood over the fallen soldier, snarling at all who came near. When rebel fighters tried to strip the centurion of his weapons and armor, the hound lunged, tearing flesh with a ferocity that shocked even battle-hardened men. For hours, the dog fought on. Soldiers swore it bit down with such force that even swords could not pry it away. It was finally brought down only after suffering multiple spear thrusts. Yet even in its final moments, it shielded the body of its master with its dying breath. When the Romans eventually claimed victory, they returned to bury their dead. There, among the fallen, they found the centurion's hound lying across his chest, lifeless yet unyielding. The story spread quickly across the Roman camps. A beast who had given its last drop of blood to protect the man it loved. In honor of its sacrifice, the legion granted the hound a warrior's funeral. Torches burned, trumpets sounded, and soldiers wept as they laid it to rest beside the centurion. To the Romans, this was no mere animal. It was a soldier, a hero of Asculum. The tale of the siege hound of Asculum became legend, told in hushed tones around campfires. It reminded every soldier that courage was not reserved for men alone, and that sometimes the fiercest warrior in the ranks had 4 legs and a beating heart of unbreakable loyalty. The general's protector. Among the ranks of Rome, there were men whose names carried the weight of history. Consuls, generals, commanders of legions. Yet even these powerful figures often relied on guardians who could not speak, but whose presence meant life or death. One such tale is that of the general's protector, a war dog whose vigilance altered the fate of a Roman leader. The story is said to have taken place during a campaign in Gaul. A Roman general, Marcus Aurelius Scaurus, was leading his legions deep into hostile territory. At night, as the campfires burned low and soldiers drifted into uneasy sleep, assassins crept silently into the camp. Their target was not the common soldier, but the general himself, a strike that could shatter Roman command. But they had not counted on the hound. The general's dog, a towering Molossian beast clad in iron-spiked collar, sensed danger before the killers could strike. With a sudden, thunderous bark, it launched itself into the dark. The first assassin's throat was torn open before a cry could escape his lips. Another raised his blade, only to be knocked to the ground beneath the crushing weight of the hound's fury. The commotion roused the guards, who quickly overwhelmed the intruders. The general's life had been spared, not by his legion, not by his Praetorian guard, but by his dog. The beast itself was gravely wounded in the fight, cut by daggers, pierced by spears, but even as blood poured from its body, it stood protectively at its master's feet, refusing to move until the danger had passed. Only when the last assassin was dead did the hound collapse, gasping but unbroken. The general, overcome with gratitude, ordered that the dog be treated as a soldier of honor. Its wounds were tended, its name recorded alongside the men who had saved Rome's leaders in times of peril. The tale of the protector spread through the empire, a reminder that even the mightiest of Rome owed their lives to guardians who walked on 4 legs, and whose courage was written not in speeches or marble, but in blood spilled for loyalty. The Battle of Vercellae. The year was 101 BC, and the fields of Vercellae in northern Italy burned beneath the summer sun. Rome faced the Cimbri, a fierce Germanic tribe whose warriors towered over men and whose cavalry thundered across the plains like a storm. For many, it seemed this might be the battle that broke Rome. But among the legions stood not only men of iron, but beasts bred for war. As the 2 armies clashed, chaos consumed the field. Horses screamed as spears rained down, and men fought in clouds of dust and blood. Then came the order: unleash the hounds. From behind the Roman lines surged the Molossian war dogs, their collars lined with steel, their jaws dripping with fury. At the front of the pack was one beast whose name would echo long after the day was done. Soldiers later called him Iron Fang. Iron Fang charged headlong into the enemy cavalry. While other dogs lunged at men, he went straight for the horses, ripping into their bellies and throats. A single animal brought down beast after beast, scattering riders who once seemed unstoppable. Enemies tried to strike him down, but each wound only fueled his rage. Covered in blood, his own and that of his foes, he fought like a demon unleashed. Eyewitnesses swore that even as javelins pierced his flank, Iron Fang refused to yield. He dragged one enemy rider from the saddle, his jaws locked so tight that no sword could force them open. Roman soldiers, inspired by his ferocity, surged forward with renewed strength, their spirits ignited by the sight of a dog fighting with more fury than any man. By the day's end, the Cimbri were broken. Their great cavalry lay scattered across the field. Many felled not by spear or sword, but by the relentless jaws of Rome's warhounds. When the victors gathered, Iron Fang was found still standing, though barely alive, his body riddled with wounds. He received a soldier's honor, paraded before the legions as the beast who turned the tide of Vercellae. To the Romans, Iron Fang was no longer just a dog. He was a warrior whose courage had saved an empire. The Emperor's Hound. Among all the tales of Roman war dogs, none carried greater weight than the story of the Emperor's Hound. This was no camp guardian, no soldier's companion. It was the personal protector of an emperor himself. The emperor was Hadrian, remembered for his walls, his travels, and his love of discipline. But in private letters, whispers survive of a massive Molossian hound who never left his side. It marched with him across provinces, slept at the door of his tent, and rode at his feet when he traveled the empire. The bond between man and beast was tested during a campaign in the provinces. One night, as Hadrian inspected his camp, a sudden attempt was made on his life. A hidden assailant rushed forward with a blade meant for Rome's ruler. Before guards could react, the Emperor's Hound struck. With terrifying speed, it leapt, locking its jaws onto the assassin's arm, dragging him to the ground. Soldiers later said the dog shook the man with such ferocity that the blade flew from his hand before he even touched Hadrian's cloak. The assassin was executed, but the dog was celebrated. Hadrian himself was said to have fed it from his own table that night, declaring, "This beast has given me what no senate, no guard, no fortress could give. Another breath of life." Legends claimed the emperor ordered statues carved of his hound, immortalizing it not as a pet, but as a warrior of Rome. Reliefs of armored dogs have been found in ruins, their faces scarred but proud, reminders of the beasts who guarded emperors as fiercely as any praetorian. The Emperor's Hound did not simply save a man, it safeguarded the empire itself. Hadrian's reign continued for years, shaping Rome's destiny, all because a loyal beast acted in a single heartbeat. To soldiers, this story was proof of what they already knew. Emperors might command legions, but sometimes an empire owed its survival to the silent courage of a dog who chose loyalty over fear. The Emperor's Hound became more than a tale. It was a symbol, etched into the soul of Rome, a reminder that true guardianship knows no crown, no rank, only devotion. Conclusion plus reflection. History often remembers emperors and generals, their names carved into marble and etched into scrolls. But the battlefield is not sustained by statues. It is shaped by sacrifice. And sometimes, those sacrifices came not from men, but from the loyal beasts who marched beside them. The guardian of Placentia, who refused to abandon his fallen master. The siege hound of Asculum, who bled until his final breath to shield his centurion. The general's protector, who tore assassins apart in the night. Iron Fang, the terror of Vercellae, who turned the tide of a war. And the Emperor's Hound, who safeguarded the very life of Rome's ruler. Each story is different, but all speak of the same truth. Loyalty knows no language. Courage knows no species. These dogs did not fight for glory, nor for coin, nor for power. They fought because their hearts knew only one command: stand with their masters until death. And in doing so, they became legends. As the centuries pass, Rome's monuments crumble, its emperors fade into memory. But these tales endure. They remind us that courage often comes from the unexpected, that devotion can burn brighter than banners, and that even the mightiest empire once leaned on the silent strength of its war dogs. They were not pets, they were not beasts, they were warriors of Rome, whose loyalty carved them into history as eternal guardians.